Good morning, and welcome back to Good Morning Tobago right here on Tobago Update. As indicated previously, this morning I am chatting with Senator Laurence Hislop, and he is sitting in for his colleague, the Minister of Sport and Community Development, Shamfa Kajol-Lewis. This morning we are going beyond the headlines. So we want to say good morning to you.
Good morning, Shenell. How are you doing? Good morning, Tobago. Morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
Excellent. Now, when we talk about beyond the headlines, there are a lot of things that we see out there in the public space, but we don't really know the person behind the headlines, or maybe sometimes getting the clarity that is often not given through sometimes headlines that are clickbait or stories that only tell half of this story. Now, you have had your fair share of headlines, I believe, throughout your term, that you might have felt like this does not cover the entire picture. I remember one of those particularly had to do with the Tobago oil spill.
Right.
When I said to you that I remember you saying that you felt like 50 million was enough, but that Tobago would be getting more money. So tell us about that a little bit. Give us the full story.
Well, the full story is that in my contribution that day in the Senate, I did say that 50 million was not enough, but additional funds would be coming, or additional assistance would be coming to help. And I think the headline spoke to the fact that I said that 50 million was enough when I didn't say that, when I said the complete opposite, because I recognize the magnitude of the challenge that the island was facing with the oil spill. And that was the government's initial response. And we saw that after that significant assistance would have come, not necessarily in allocation per se, but government's response. The national government actually took up more of the oil spill recovery than the THA in terms of the expenditure. Because of the salvage of the vessel, the move of the vessel, the salvage of the oil with the tanker that would have been in the port for days on end, just receiving the oil. The Ministry of Energy took up that, and at a joint select committee recently, it was brought to our attention that the oil that is being stored at Studley Park, that there was an arrangement between the central government and the THA for the central government to take responsibility for the removal of the oil at Studley Park. And that came out from one of the officials of the THA who shared with us that was an arrangement that Ministry of Energy gave it to NGC to do the procurement for contractors to come to remove the oil. So all of that is cost that was incurred by the central government. So the 50 million would have been sent to assist with the extraordinary spend of the Tobago House of Assembly with regards to the oil spill. But I did say that it was not enough to treat with the oil spill. But that's just part of the course. You say things, and I've recognized, being in the business, that the media may make mistakes, whether they're mistakes or they're willful. It's part of the course, and you try to correct it, or you just move on.
Totally understood. Now we're in a situation where a number of fisher folk are still coming out and saying we have not yet been compensated.
Yeah.
And you hear the IOPC saying we are still able to take claims from the fisher folk, but the fisher folk are saying we are not adequately prepared or having the capacity to fill these forms out and truly setting up a good claim. So one of the suggestions that I would have made was to possibly hold a workshop with the fisher folk the IOPC coming to Tobago to host that workshop to give the clarity that is needed and help guide fisher folk in their application. However, I don't think anybody kind of picked up on that. But do you see that as being a fundamental part of bridging the gap between these organizations and the grassroots?
I guess any opportunity that you can have better collaboration for better results for persons affected in anything, whether it be disaster, or even an individual who has their own daily challenges, whatever collaboration that could take place to make the process easier for assistance to get to an individual is always welcome, and maybe it's something that IOPC can look at.
Right. And do you think, being someone who has parliamentary colleagues, you're often there yourself, that you can try to have that communication to push and advocate for this to happen? You and your other colleagues as well.
Well, first and foremost, we have to know exactly what the challenges. I don't know what the challenges are, and if I believe if the fisher folk come forward and speak to the MPs, that's something like that can I don't see why it can't be maybe the MPs advocating for that to happen, and that's what we have to understand, that the MPs sit in the role of advocacy, but MPs cannot advocate for something that they're unaware of.
Understood. And I remember earlier I did make a mistake on set when I said that the Office of the Representative for Tobago East, Ayanna Webster Roy, was offering assistance to fisher folk in applying for that, to file their claim, and that it was available at CAS. And she ensured to offer the clarity, asking for an apology for that no assistance at all was being meted out to the fisher folk. Do you feel like the MP for Tobago West and Tobago East should take that type of initiative to try and bridge that gap?
No, I can't speak for either MP and what initiatives they can roll out. As I said, if they are unaware that there is a gap, then you can't fill a gap that you're unaware of. And so if the fishermen are having challenges, they have avenues via different government officials, whether it be their area representative from the Tobago House of Assembly standpoint, or even the MPs. And so if there is a gap, they have to be aware that there is a gap before they can even try as much as possible to be that bridge. And so if fishermen are having challenges, fishermen have avenues that they can reach out to the area representatives, to the MPs, and so on, and share their concerns. But again, we see where persons take up the role of governance or their responsibilities based on how they feel. And so you may have people who say that the THA is responsible for fisheries in Tobago and so on, and that kind of thing. So if the fishermen are having challenges, then your first port of call, or one of your main ports of call, could be your area representative, the secretary for the division. You have a fisheries department, and those are the persons that you could have conversations with.
Right. Yeah. Persons are often, making statements that might allude to the fact that persons like yourself are silent on Tobago matters. But can you offer clarity as to what your role is as a senator?
But you see, the first question you should ask the persons who make that statement is, what am I silent on? Because I don't think since I became a senator that I've been silent on Tobago matters. I've spoken up on Tobago's matters, whether it be in support of something or highlighting something that we recognize is a deficiency. And so when persons say I'm silent, I want to know in what regard are they speaking about, because I've been very vocal on Tobago matters whenever I have the opportunity to speak, whether it be in the Senate, whether it be in an interview, with doing a program, advocating for something. I've been very vocal on Tobago matters. I've always been in the media, always been available when I'm asked to do an interview and to share my position and the party's position on Tobago. And I can't see in what regard persons are saying that I'm silent on Tobago matters. Is it because I am not saying what you want to hear me say that you say I'm silent? And not because you're not hearing doesn't mean that work is not being done and advocacy is not being done. And so my role as a senator is to, especially coming from Tobago, is to put forward the Tobago position on particular issues, to highlight the Tobago position on issues. When I sit on joint select committees, I don't always treat with, or it's not only the national issues that I deal with on a joint select committee. A lot of the times, I would zero in on what an agency's work or how an agency's work affects Tobago and what it is delivering Tobago. And I remember one of the conversations we had was with the Bureau of Standards, and what is their presence in Tobago? What are they doing in Tobago? And coming out of that, we were able to highlight the fact that they're here. There's an office. They come. I think they're 2 days a week and that kind of thing. And to speak to the fact that the Bureau of Standards is looking to increase its staff in Tobago and to have a more permanent presence in Tobago. And so those are the kinds of things whenever divisions come before joint select committees, a lot of the times I may take the lead on Tobago issues, and it's from there that we've identified challenges. As I said, that's where it came to the fore that the oil that is being stored at the Studley Park landfill is being, that the central government, in collaboration with the THA, that the central government has now taken responsibility to remove the oil.
So, and how does having a senator that is Tobagonian help to impact Tobago's overall development?
Well, I think I'm not a cabinet minister, and so the voice and the advocacy, there's an additional voice to your 2 MPs who are cabinet ministers. And so there are things that, let's take for instance, if there's a challenge that somebody may be having at maybe Registrar General, you could speak to a colleague and ask what's happening, and ask them to look into it, and they will look into it, and they can come to, you could find solutions. That's what we do. Instead of always making noise, you can speak to your colleagues and ask a colleague, hey, I got a call concerning this. Could you look into it? And there's so many other areas that you can just speak to a colleague, have them look into it, have the problem rectified, or look for a solution. Because you see, sometimes things happen within departments and divisions of ministries that have responsibility in Tobago, and the minister may not be aware, and a resident of Tobago may just reach out to me or to the MP, because I may be a little more accessible on a particular day than an MP, and it gives a Tobagonian an additional person to reach out to who has some sort of connection that could make something happen, that could make the solution, we could find a solution to the challenge that the person may be having. So Tobago finds itself in a very unique position that we have, and in this regard now you have 2 senators from Tobago. So it gives you additional voice, it gives you an additional avenue for assistance, for collaboration, for connection. And it's not that we take over the work of the MP. We cannot do that. Of the MPs, we can't do that. But what we do is you quietly pick up the phone, you call somebody, you send a message, hey, this is going on. Could we look at how to?
And when it comes to those conversations with, not necessarily your colleagues, but persons that you may come into contact with, the New Tobago Airport, has that been one of the conversations that has come up, specifically when it comes to businesses and Tobagonians being able to benefit from, on a business perspective, economically from that new airport?
Well, it is. I have been asked about it. I've been asked about it personally. The Airports Authority will put out an ad when it is time for them to look for concessionaires. And I can't say, I don't have the information whether or not there would be an allocation for Tobagonians and that kind of thing.
Is this something that you are advocating for?
Well, listen, whether it's advocating or we have to understand that these things have a process to follow. And it's conversations that you can have. And it's also conversations that we can have with the members of parliament and so on. But we're looking for let's wait for the process to take its place. Let's let the ads come out. The Airports Authority will put out an ad when that time is appropriate, and then we could.
But the Airport Authority does have a board.
Yeah.
Right? And recommendations are often made to the board to ensure that there is a quota of Tobagonians that can benefit as concessionaires or other businesses that are present in that airport. And a lot of Tobago businesses have come forward to ask, what would we be benefiting from this airport? Is it a situation where, we are submitting tenders and we are graded on the scale as everyone else, and maybe a business person in Trinidad who has the capacity because they already maybe have 3-4 branches of their existing business may get a greater preference because of their business track record, as opposed to new or small and medium-sized enterprises in Tobago that are still growing and building the capacity to be able to compete with these enterprises.
Well, I am not even sure it's accurate to say that there's usually a quota.
No, I'm not saying that there's usually. I'm asking if there will be, or can there be a recommendation?
That's a conversation that can be had with the Airports Authority to find out if in the rollout there will be an allocation for, let's say, if you have 50 booths, that maybe 10, 20 are set aside for Tobagonians, or Tobagonians given the first preference. I guess that's a conversation that can happen. But you see, sometimes we place, and I guess rightfully so, because persons are elected and appointed. But the media can reach out to the maybe the CEO, the chairman of the board, and so on, and ask these kinds of questions, and not necessarily somebody in my position that may not have that necessary or that power that to say, listen, put aside 10 or put aside 20. Yeah,
but you do have
influence,
the influence and the air of the ministers responsible. So
maybe it's as I said, it's a conversation that can, persons would have asked, I would have asked questions about it, and the information is that at the appropriate time, the Airports Authority will put out the ad to treat with that kind of thing.
But can you see yourself in the future, making that effort to ensure that this is something that happens?
Well, there's absolutely nothing wrong with myself or even the MPs saying to advocating for that. Listen, let's try and make sure we accommodate as much Tobagonian vendors who may be interested, or Tobago business people who may be interested in getting involved in concessions at the airport.
Excellent. Now, you have had an image of being quite the religious guy.
An image.
So yeah. So how do you make that cross section between religion and entering politics in a social state where persons feel like two should not intersect?
When people say they see me as a religious guy, yes, I have been involved in my church for a number of years, at various levels. I'm still very much involved in the church. And I see the intersection being one of service. It is people that you're dealing with, people from a religious level, and people at a social level. And that's where the intersection is. The intersection is that both entities are geared towards the service of people. And I don't really like per se the position that you may see a religious person. I see myself as a child of God, and what God requires of me is, when I'm in service to people, to give people the best that I can, and which is what I've always strived to do. I have a mantra that if I can, I will. If I can assist, I definitely will. Most of the times, if I may not be able to assist, it's because I definitely may not be in a position to do that. And so that's where the intersection is. The intersection is people. How you conduct your affairs with people is important. Not just from a religious standpoint, but just being a nice person, being a good person, doing your best to treat your fellow men as you would like to be treated if you were in a position. And so I don't separate the two, religion and politics, which may sound strange. But the reality is you are dealing with people. People are what you treat with or who you treat with in religion, and it's who you treat with in politics.
And do you feel like, your religious upbringing has prepared you to be in politics, or do you feel like it has shielded you from the realities of, how cutthroat politics could be?
That's a very interesting question because I always tell folks, growing up and having leadership positions within a religious organization trains you for life. Because I rose to the position of leader of one of the what I will consider one of the bigger churches in Tobago, and I would have been in the leadership of that church for about 3 years, and that is, I believe, that prepared me for where I am today, because leadership, no matter where you are, causes your back to become strong. And whether it is church leadership or political leadership, it matters not, because as I said, what creates that intersection, or at that intersection, is people. And people are people wherever they are. People are people in church, people are people in politics. I remember one time, or it's a statement I use pretty often, that the best place to find a hypocrite is in a church. The best place to find a hypocrite is in a church, because the church is the place where sick people go seeking healing. And Christ had 12 disciples, and one was a hypocrite because one betrayed him. So he's close, and I use that analogy because all the others did things wrong, but one was closest to him and literally set him up to be crucified. And so it matters not where your leadership is, I would say, but leadership in the church prepared me for leadership outside of the church, because the leadership, I believe, is something that you take very seriously. It's something that you don't take lightly. And so rising to that level at the church, and having to manage church boards and work along with a pastor, and work along with departments, and manage projects and manage budgets and so on, prepares you. It's because people don't recognize that churches, in some instances, can operate like a business, because you have money coming in, you have people to manage, you have departments to manage, and if you mess up, it affects lives. And it's the same thing in politics. You have to manage what you have, and if you don't manage it properly, it affects lives.
In your capacity as senator, have you encountered anything that you were not expecting, and how have you been able to deal with that?
I think getting into the Senate was an interesting. It was interesting for me. I learned a lot, but to say that I've experienced something that I didn't expect, I don't think so. And I think the question may be a little challenging for me to answer, because
you step into certain portfolios and you have an idea of what that might look like or feel like for you, whether it be on a personal level, on a family level, or on a professional level. And then you get there and you're like, okay, this was not what I was expecting at all from this. And how have you been able to maneuver through that?
From that perspective, I think persons on the outside looking in see a senatorial position or a minister's position as a cushy position. It's not. It's a lot of long nights. I remember my first sitting actually finished after 1 o'clock in the morning. I didn't contribute in that debate, but we left the chamber after 1 in the morning. And those are things that you may not prepare yourself for. The the constant back and forth on the air bridge, and the constant transportation and the constant movement, and the joint select committee meetings, and you may have a GSC today and a sit-in tomorrow and those kinds of things. It's not as cushy as people think it is. Certainly not cushy. It's a lot of work, but you have to adjust. And on that day when we left the chamber at 1 o'clock. I went to sleep, but I had ministerial colleagues who were ministers, who obviously had to get up in a couple hours to go to a meeting, to do something at the office and that kind of thing. So when we look, sometimes looking on from the outside, we see it as luxury. It is certainly not. Yes, there's some privileges that comes with the office, but the level of work that is required, it can get a little too much sometimes, and not necessarily for me, because I don't have a portfolio. So there are days that I may not have to be in Trinidad for weeks. Sometimes if we do have a sit-in, if we do have a joint select committee, I may not have to be in Trinidad. But when you consider, let's say for instance, our two MPs who reside in Tobago, have families in Tobago, but they have to be constantly back and forth, and that also can pose a challenge. I tell people, a 20-minute flight, it takes you 3 hours, because your preparation for the flight, get on the flight, get to Trinidad, transit from Piarco to Port of Spain, it does take a toll.
Understood. Have you ever found yourself in a position where you felt like you were unprepared, and how were you able to maneuver that, or even feeling somewhat of an imposter getting into it for the first time, and how were you able to deal with that?
Imposter is a strong word.
There's the imposter syndrome of feeling like you don't deserve to be in the room.
Well, I don't think I've ever felt that I don't deserve to be in the room, because what I bring to the table, others don't. Because my perspective is unique. My perspective comes from my own background, my own challenges, and I think people forget that before I became a senator, I had to go through everything that everybody goes through, and becoming a senator doesn't necessarily change that. I've persons who are closest to me will tell you one of my biggest mantras is, positions are temporary. And so, and I always say that I serve at the pleasure of one individual. I serve at the pleasure of the Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And so whenever you occupy a position and think that you're untouchable, something's wrong with you if you think that, because whatever little privilege you have now, I could get a message now that says appointment has been revoked because we're looking to go in a different direction. So if you think that your position sets you apart from people, one of the things I shouldn't say I dread, but one of the things that gives me a little discomfort is if I am at the airport and a security officer sees me and wants me to jump the line. It puts a feeling in me that, hey, these people here, come on. So those kinds of things, so I have never had a challenge being in the room with persons who others may think are more superior. What you do is that you learn when you're in the room. You learn and you contribute. And that's one of the things that I have benefited as a senator, getting in, not having, quote unquote, what you may consider political pedigree. But when I'm in the room, I do my best to absorb as much and learn as much and contribute as well, because my contribution is valuable. It adds value to whatever is taking place. I remember my first stint on a joint select committee. This is the first time you're not trained for it, and that's a thing that a lot of people don't really recognize. You are thrown into the deep end in some instances, and you have to swim. And so in a joint select committee, you face on with colleagues, you face on with opposition members. One of the committees that I am on is chaired by the Speaker of the House, And so you face on with Madam Speaker, and then you face on with technocrats in ministries. And you have to find your way within that whole makeup. And the parliamentary staff is such an excellent bunch of people that they assist members, and even members who've been there 10, 15 years. Senator Mark has been there since I know politics, really. And he's one of the longest serving what I would say parliamentarians, and he as well gets significant assistance from the parliamentary staff. And so you now take the documentation that you've been given. There's a lot of reading, because if you have to do an inquiry into an agency, the agency sends written responses. And you have to do a lot of reading, you have to dissect the information, you do your research. The parliamentary staff provides you with what they call issues papers, which are guideline questions. But you as well have to determine from the written responses and even the guideline questions, how do you couch questions to get the response for the public? And so those are the kinds of things that you have to learn quickly. You have to be confident in what you're doing. You can't shy away, because if you shy away, you could be eaten up. Your contributions have to be well thought out. Sometimes you are thrown into a debate. You may have to bring a point that you didn't even prepare for, especially when you're doing rebuttals. Because I remember on the debate with the coat of arms, the national emblems, Senator Mark made a comment about the committee, the National Emblems Committee, not being consulted on the change. And he sought to quote from the Act, the National Emblems Act. But what he failed to do was to completely quote the clause that he was quoting. And I was handed, because I had to enter the debate as the second government speaker. And I was handed the same act and asked to look at the clause and tell me what you see in the clause. And when I read the clause, I recognized that consulting the committee is not a must for the minister. Now, the committee has to be set up, but the committee is an advisory committee, and it is not absolutely necessary for the minister to consult the committee on changes to the coat of arms or to the national emblems. And those are the kinds of things that if you shy away from, you lose the moment, and you lose what you bring to the table.
Understood. Now we're having an interesting conversation. We almost forgot that we have to go to the break. So guys, we'll take a break right here, and we'll see you soon right after this. Good morning, and welcome back to Good Morning Tobago. Now we are going beyond the headlines, and this morning we are chatting with Senator Laurence Hislop. Now we've been having an extremely interesting conversation about his role as senator, his ability to advocate on Tobago's behalf, and the benefits being derived from having Tobago representatives in the parliament as senators. Now, when it comes to the issue or the topic of Tobago's autonomy, you were one of the strong advocates for supporting that bill. Now, the Tobago Constitutional Amendment Bill fell through because we didn't receive the support of the opposition. However, with all of that, many conversations were had. Where are we going from here? What are the next steps? Is it that the central government has now realized that Tobagonians are not serious about autonomy, so let's put this one on the back burner? Or is there a new perspective, new lens being brought on the whole autonomy issue, and change is being made in the background to ensure that when it comes back to the House, that it is supported?
You know, I want to remind us of where this process started. I should say the modern process. And I think we sometimes fail to remember that it was a chief secretary, a PNM chief secretary, along with Mr. Tojoy Charles, that came together and said, listen, we need to have discussions on this thing, and we need to speak to this thing. The kind of conversations that I have had with individuals, not necessarily party members and not necessarily government and parliamentary individuals, but senior public servants in particular places have said that what was on offer for Tobago to have additional autonomy was significantly superior to what has ever been offered before. And the length that the central government went and the length that Dr. Rowley has gone to bring additional powers, additional resources to Tobago, additional governance structure to Tobago, was significant. I think that question ought to be posed really and truly to those who are now in charge of the Tobago House of Assembly. When we talk about autonomy, what's your position? What's your real position? Because it was under the instructions of the Chief Secretary of the Tobago House of Assembly that the constitutional amendment bill could not get the required majority. I want to remind Tobagonians that every single member of the House on the government side voted in favor of the Island Government Bill, which interestingly is on the order paper of the Senate, which means that if the Senate, the Parliament is following its procedure, that a bill was passed in the House, so it comes on the order paper for the Senate because it is to be debated on the Senate. It's not going to be debated because you don't have the companion bill, which is the Constitutional Amendment Bill. And so it was under the instructions, the clear the aid memoir that the Chief Secretary sent, that at the end of all that he had in it said to the bottom, do not proceed any further with these bills. And that, my friends, that, brothers and sisters in Tobago, is what caused us to not have additional autonomy. That is what caused us to not have lawmaking powers for what we were going to be given lawmaking powers for. That is what caused us not to have additional funding and additional responsibility, and the Secretary of Finance being corporation sole. Those were that simple instruction gave the United National Congress the power to say, we're not supporting. And so that question about where do we go, because it was a long process that involved Tobago and Tobagonians, that got us to the point where we had 2 bills laid in Parliament.
So when it comes to the Tobago Autonomy Bill, as well as other areas for development, how important is it for you and for your colleagues to ensure that the type of collaboration that is needed with the THA is there, regardless of how you feel personally or regardless of the politics?
But that has been the government has proven that by its track record, because even recently the MP for Tobago East reminded us at the sod-turning ceremony for the water treatment plant in Goldsboro that it was a direct instruction from the Prime Minister to cabinet ministers that this new administration that came into office in December 2021, they are young. They may not be fully au courant with how governance works. And he said to them, whatever assistance they need, give it to them. And if as a minister you seek to stymie that, he said to his members, you are going to answer to me. And so we've seen that from the track record. I hear people talking about the central government stifling Tobago for funding. That is far from the truth. Far from the truth. Yes, how the funds come, because the entire country is still grappling with a cash flow issue. You get 2 and 1 in your quarter. You don't get the full quarter. And the reality is, this administration is getting its funding in a better place than the previous administration, because the administration prior to December 2021 was receiving its allocation every month. And so when you hear the complaints that, oh, we not get, that is not true. The administration is receiving its allocation. Yes, it may not be. And I want to remind Tobagonians that the Chief Secretary, when he was Secretary of Finance, said he had a conversation with the Minister of Finance, and they agreed to this process of 2 and 1. 2 months as a lump sum and 1 come. And you know, governance is an interesting thing, because it is not just the Tobago House of Assembly that may not get its releases as it would like. The ministries who don't get their releases as they would like. The ministries who get cutbacks in their releases. And you have to manage, because you have to always remember that a budget is an estimate of income and expenditure. And so you may estimate to get XYZ amount of money, but that doesn't happen. And so you have to now readjust. And so the collaboration is there, and the collaboration is important for Tobago. And the government has shown over and over again that it is willing and able. That water treatment plant, there had to be collaboration for that to take place. And the minister outlined every step as to where consultation and collaboration with the Tobago House of Assembly and the residents and the communities that are around that will be affected by the project, all of that was done, because that was a requirement of the IDB. In order for you to get the money, you have to have consultations, you have to collaborate.
Right. And I remember, I think we had this conversation possibly off air before, when I asked, how come you did not put your hat in the ring for the next general election on behalf of the PNM? We saw that both the MP for Tobago East and MP for Tobago West went unopposed in the PNM screening. Yeah. And why do you think that no one decided to challenge them?
But if you're satisfied with the relationship, why change it? If you're satisfied with what has been happening, I believe our MPs have grown over the years and are experienced members of parliament, not just members of parliament, but experienced ministers. And they've proven that they can do the work. And the reality is, if you are satisfied with the work and you are happy with the work that is taking place, why would you want to change it out?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Now, the People's National Movement this month is transitioning to a new prime minister, because the prime minister indicated that after he had some stuff to do, I believe it was with CARICOM, that then he would be demitting office to allow the minister, Stuart Young, to take over as prime minister. What does that mean for you in the execution of your duties, as well as the People's National Movement as an organization?
Well, I find it's an interesting way that you couch that statement, that he's stepping aside to allow Stuart Young to become prime minister. The prime minister made it very clear that he's going into retirement. So it's not about his stepping down. It's not about allowing someone else. It's about him coming to the listen. The prime minister is 75 years old. He's been in politics for 45 years. That's a long time. That's very close to very close to my age. I am not 45, but that's very close to my age. But to be in public life for 45 years is human service to a country. People think that politics is, as we said earlier, cushy. It's not cushy. And so I think he's come to that point where he says, listen, it's time for me to retire. It's time for me to spend time with my family, spend time with my wife. My wife is retired. And so I think it's deserving after 45 years that he can rest, he can relax, it's the first time we've seen it done in Trinidad and Tobago. And I don't think we've seen it done in the CARICOM, where a sitting prime minister says, listen, I'm resigning. Before the end, I'm not going to go into the election, fighting an election. And I think he should be complimented for that a leader says, I'm good. I've come to this time, and I've done all my work. 45 years I've worked hard. I could rest. What does that mean for me? What does it mean for the party? It means that we transition to new leadership. And the party over the years, we've transitioned from Dr. Williams, we've transitioned from George Chambers, we've transitioned from Patrick Manning. And the party remains solid simply because the party structure allows for that. The party structure allows for leadership to come to the fore. This process of the Prime Minister resigning and Minister Young becoming the next Prime Minister is a constitutional is the execution of something from the national constitution, and so it doesn't I don't see a big issue. I don't see a big issue. Minister Young has proven himself as a workhorse. He's proven himself as a genuine individual, and I honestly don't see there being a challenge with this transition from Dr. Rowley to Minister Young. The party has made its position. We've allowed for ventilation of the issue, and we are at this point now where our focus is the election. The focus is governing and the election and winning the election.
Right. And finally, as we round up this discussion this morning, what are your views on the performance of this current THA administration? And if you were to rate their performance, how would you rate it?
What's the rating? What's the range? What's the band? What's the band? You give me a band.
0 to 10.
0 to 10? If I'm being honest, I'll give them a 4. I'll give them a 4. And 10 being the best, right? Yeah, I'll give them a 4. I think this administration started off on the wrong footing, in that this administration fought an election without a plan, without showing Tobagonians really and truly what we are going to do for Tobago. And I may get licks for giving them even a 4, because some of my people may say, "You give them so high," but I give them a 4, because we had a lot of persons that required understanding how the governance process works, but they came in under the mantra that we're gonna fix it. And you will ask, and I keep asking, or I asked even during the election, what are they fixing? The truth is, if you run an election without a plan, you're gonna govern without a plan, and that's what we see. We've seen an administration that is governing vai, that has terminated people, that has sought to recommission projects with a whole heap of fanfare. Last night I was on another program and I said we putting up a plaque for recommissioning of a swimming pool that you spent $2 million to renovate, when that pool was built in 2 years at the cost of $19 million. And so you don't unveil plaques and cut ribbons for recommissioning. You cut ribbons and unveil plaques for things that you build, because maintenance is your job. Maintenance is your work as a government. And $2 million restoration, and I'm very happy for the people of East Tobago. That should have been done. The children in those schools, that should have been done already. And so what we recognize is that this administration is doing a lot of recommissioning, which is part of your job. Maintenance of government facilities is part of your job.
To be fair, if they have had the mandate of fixing things, and they are recommissioning things that they deem needed to be fixed, is that not them fulfilling their mandate?
Come on, Shenell. No. You see, and you may want to couch it like that, but that
I don't think it's couching. But it's just looking at it from that perspective.
But they campaign on the fact that we're gonna fix things. We're gonna develop Tobago. And there was all of these things about having a website for population, for Tobagonians to see what contractors are getting jobs, and being able to see. That was a promise that there would be a website set up.
But wasn't that done? I can't even remember e-tendering.
Yeah, but let me ask you a question. Is it functioning? Are you able to log in? Are you able to log in there?
I personally do.
I don't think any Tobagonian could log in to and see what projects people are tendering on. If you don't, if the minority doesn't ask the questions in the house, we don't get answers. And
but
even
it's dangerous to say that there's no system to do it when there is an e-tendering system set up.
And even when the questions are asked in the house, they don't. There are instances where secretaries don't answer. All right, and you promise particular things. You promise a level of transparency that we've not seen. You've literally decimated the local contracting sector because you're of the belief that contractors are all P&M, and it's not me. The business community is constantly saying that Tobago is at a standstill. And I asked the question, after December 2021 to now, what has been done? What have you brought to the table that we can say, yes, we've seen an improvement in governance in Tobago? We haven't. We haven't. When you look at some of the projects that were, and some of the things that were done under the first term of a PNM administration in 2001, you look at what was done in the first term, and I hear people talking about 20 years and 21 years in governance. The People's National Movement was re-elected for 5 terms. You were re-elected. And if you're re-elected, it means that the population and the electorate was satisfied with your work. So from 2001 to 2005, election, re-elected, re-elected again. That's the reason why Mr. London had 16 years unbroken. And so it's not about 20 years. The development came in cycles. And for every time the PNM had to give account for its stewardship and went back to the population, it was re-elected. And in some instances, we got 100% because we won at one point in time 12-0. Okay. And so my grade is 4. I had expectations.
And even with a grade of 4, knowing that they are your political opponents, do you have a favorite secretary or assistant secretary in the THA?
If I have a favorite,
yeah.
Let me tell you something. You see Sonny Craig? That's my friend. That's my friend. We came into we came into. The
reason why I did that is because I know that, based on the religious connection, you both are of the Seventh-day Adventist.
No.
Is that a bit
unfair? It's not even about religion. Sonny and I were friends before politics, and I have known Sonny all my life. When Sonny was singing with Celestials and so on, I would go as a little boy to concerts and listen. And so the thing about it is, the point I'm making is that the relationship between Sonny Craig and I never changed. Never changed. We never, if we see each other, we'll give each other lights on the road and that kind of thing. It has never changed. I may not agree with the policy of the administration that he's part of. I may not agree with everything that they put forward, but you asked me who's my favorite, and he's my favorite because he's my friend. We've been friends since I know myself.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Well, guys, we want to thank you so much for joining the conversation today, and we want to say a special thank you to Senator Laurence Hislop for being a part of this morning's quite engaging conversation as we went beyond the headlines. Guys, again, we want to thank you for your likes, your shares, and your comments, and all that you have done and continue to do to make Tobago Updates the #1 broadcaster here on the island of Tobago. Again, I'm Shenell Felix, and have a great day.
It's a brand new morning, rise up to a brand new